Welcome, everyone. Those of you who've signed on, and hope I expect more will, and those of you who may be watching this as a recording. This is part of the India Philanthropy Alliance Town Hall series, virtual Town Hall, where we, on an almost monthly basis, have discussed topics, often with a guest speaker or two, of interest to our community of India Giving Day and IPA, and people who are in this kind of philanthropy ecosystem linking the United States and India. My name is Alex Counts. I'm the executive director of IPA. And I'll just take this moment to mention that we've launched on October 2nd, our fourth India Giving Day campaign, and those nonprofits that want to be part of it listed on our website, eligible for matching donations and so forth. The deadline is next Friday, October 31st, Halloween. So mark that on your calendar. We're getting a lot of applications, a lot of new groups, but just don't want to have anyone miss the deadline because they weren't aware of it. We've tackled many topics in this series. We used to do 2 or 3 a year. Now we're doing more like 10, 11 a year. And a lot of them have to do with fundraising, but some of them have to do with other topics. And we welcome suggestions of topics from those of you who are invited. And those of you who you get a calendar invite for this and get an email about this, please always feel free to invite your people in your organization, board members, volunteers, donors, staff, whether they be in India or the US. The next one in this series will be on monitoring and evaluation. It'll be on November 19th, and we're going to have one that's driven by a technology working group that we have in December on a date that has not yet been decided, but will be soon. Our friends from Pratham USA, one of the founding members of IPA, were interested enough to invite their colleagues to this town hall that they were asking for a flyer that they could circulate with all the information. And we've never really done that, but I guess we should. So we will try to come up with something that'll allow you to market this within your organizations more easily in the future. We do not advertise these publicly, but we invite everyone in the kind of India Giving Day IPA community, defined broadly, and we'll often have a good turnout. I expect one today. We're going to be hearing from 2 experts who've been part of 2 recent reports about philanthropy related to India and or the US and how they link together. And we're just so excited. I'll be introducing them in just a moment. One of them, from our friends at Dalberg, did a study commissioned by diaspora and IPA, revisiting a study that was done in 2018, which said that Indian Americans volunteer at far above the national average in the US, but donate their money at below the national average. And that became a kind of a point of challenge for the community to sustain the leadership in volunteering time, but to grow financial donations. And when we started this study 7 years later, most of the people involved with the study, including our speaker, who I've come to respect greatly, and I'm really happy to have him with us, but he and most of the others thought that we were going to show that the giving gap widened because of larger kind of societal trends in tax law and so forth. And we were delighted to see that the giving gap has narrowed, and we'll be hearing about that. And that's about Indian American giving to all causes, not just to India, but to any cause that's important to them. We'll also be hearing from a leader from GivingTuesday, one of the leading philanthropic organizations trying to mobilize philanthropy everywhere, GivingTuesday, and their India team is especially active, and we work with them closely. So I'm going to ask each of them to speak for about 10 minutes about their respective reports. This is kind of reprising a session we did at our philanthropy summit held on October 2nd in San Francisco, but with different representatives of the 2 organizations. And after a 10 after about a 10-minute opening presentation. If I'm moved to ask a question and my role as moderator, I will. If not, I'll just throw it open to you all to ask questions to get more clarity about these reports, but also to have a community conversation about what these reports mean. How can we leverage what we're learning from these reports to not just celebrate what we now know and have learned and have accomplished, but also how to move forward, because each of the organizations involved in the IPA community could do much more good with more resources. So how do we get them more resources? That's a fundamental question we keep coming back to. So first, I will be inviting Kavita Mathew, who I'll bring up here, and to share, and then we'll go to Girish Pendse from Dalberg. Kavita Mathew is an independent expert on fundraising for nonprofits. She consults with GivingTuesday, a global generosity movement, as a senior advisor in India. She was formerly a consultant with the world's first and largest nonprofit crowdfunding platform, Global Giving. She helped Global Giving increase its reach and impact in India, drawing from her decade-long experience of working with multiple nonprofits in the country. Before discovering her passion for making the world a better place, Kavita spent a number of years at Goldman Sachs, where she found her love for spreadsheets and data. We're so happy to have you, and just without further ado, over to you to share the highlights of this exciting report. And also, we just got a report, Kavita, from Sumit Raula, who joined your meeting on October 7th, I believe it was, where a kind of a brainstorming meeting of leaders to, where do we take this? And she reported to our board on Tuesday, although most of the people on this call were not in that meeting. So, but we were all super interested in that and want to hear from you now. So over to you.
Thanks, Alex, and hello, everyone. I'm also joined by two of my colleagues, Priyanka and Ragni. They're also on the call today. So while I pull up my screen here, just give me a second. Can you see my screen?
It's coming up. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good morning. I'm assuming all of you are in the US, so good morning to all of you. I'm really excited to present the findings from Udarta. It is really a first of its kind study by and for Indian nonprofits. Now, Udarta EG is an acronym. It stands for Using Data and Research to Advance Everyday Giving in India. And if you're familiar with Hindi, Udarta also means generosity. And like Alex shared, I work as a senior advisor for GivingTuesday in India. And while many of you know of GivingTuesday as a day of giving, which it is, it's today grown into a global generosity movement. It's present in over 110 countries, including in India. But what many people don't know is that this movement is fueled by the GivingTuesday Data Commons with insights and data. And the GivingTuesday Data Commons is today the world's largest philanthropic data collaboration, and it powers research like Udarta. Now, the Data Commons has over 2,000 collaborators across the globe. It includes data providers like crowdfunding platforms, payment gateways, researchers, academic institutions, donation management platforms, and nonprofits. And Udarta EG was co-designed and co-delivered by 13 pioneer partners of the GivingTuesday Data Commons in India. We've been really fortunate to have such committed organizations join the collaborative for its first project. Now, if you look at past research in India, it largely focused on wealthy donors, CSR, and a little bit on youth volunteering. And we have groundbreaking reports like the How India Gives by the Center for Social Impact and Philanthropy, then the Everyday Giving in India report by Satwa, which showed us that there is a billion giver potential. And the next building block to improve our understanding of everyday giving was this, right? What are nonprofits actually doing to engage everyday givers as both donors and volunteers? And what do they need to do it better? And that's where Udarta EG comes in. This study asks two simple but powerful questions. How are nonprofits engaging everyday givers as donors, and how are they engaging them as volunteers? So we had about 304 nonprofits take part in an in-depth survey, and about 40 of them, including some sector experts, participate in qualitative interviews as well. So let's first look at the scale of opportunity that the study found. Everyday givers already contribute 1/3 of nonprofit funding in India, and that's significant. This also corroborates with data from the India Philanthropy Report 2025. We also saw that volunteer numbers are growing year on year, signaling that there's rising community engagement in India. But why are nonprofits even pursuing everyday giving? We found 4 top reasons why they engage them in fundraising. One, or why they fundraise from everyday givers. One is community building. 65% of the nonprofits said that it builds local support for them. Second, of course, is unrestricted flexible funding, which is critical for operational needs. Third is the multiplier effect that comes with engaging everyday givers, because everyday givers don't just give money, they become volunteers, advocates, and amplifiers. And the last top one was visibility, because supporters naturally become ambassadors through social media and word of mouth. Yet, we found only 37% of the study's overall sample to report that they actively fundraise from everyday givers. But among those who do, a huge percentage, that's 97%, found it worthwhile, with about 36% finding it highly worthwhile. And that's really showing a major missed opportunity for the sector. Now, if you look at motivations for engaging volunteers, we found a similar trend. Volunteers, of course, amplify visibility, they build communities and offer skilled capacity. So it's not just about free labor, it's about the energy they bring, the skills, and the reach. Interestingly, 70% of the study's respondents reported that they actively engage volunteers, so a larger percentage than what we saw for fundraising. And just like fundraising, a huge percentage say that it's worthwhile, and 1/3 say it's highly worthwhile. So this is really interesting information that came out for us. Now let's look at what's working. I mean, we have 70 pages of insights in the Udarta report, and I would encourage all of you to read it, and my colleagues will put in the links to the report as well, but wanted to share some top highlights with you. For fundraising, we found that nonprofits with in-house fundraising teams consistently outperform outsourced approaches. They are showing higher donor retention, more funds from individuals, and more volunteers. For volunteer engagement, 2 top things that we wanted to highlight was that volunteer referrals lead to 3.7 times more volunteers, and simple things like appreciation certificates increase volunteer count 5.6 times. The study also shows that technology matters. As per our analysis, even the use of something as simple as having a donate button can mean a 12-point increase in everyday giving. Whereas if you use automated tax receipts and CRMs, it's associated with a higher rate of recurring givers. So if you're using CRMs, you're 18.7% more likely to have repeat givers. But sadly, 2 in 5 organizations are not tapping into tech-based engagement at all when they look at engaging everyday givers. Now, the study also found some strategic gaps in engagement. And the biggest one was that most nonprofits are reactive and not strategic. Nearly half have no structured donor retention plans. Very few organizations make more than 1 ask a year. Whether it's for money, time, or skills, most engagement is one-off or on an as-needed basis and not sustained. We did some analysis on the frequency of appeals, and data shows that strategic approaches work better. It's common sense, but data also showed the same thing. And what it showed is that organizations making regular appeals are 15 percentage points more likely to find everyday giving worthwhile. And if you've read the How India Gives report by CSIP, you'll see a correlation here, because in that study, one of the top reasons why urban Indians said they don't give is because they. And I saw similar data from Dalberg's report as well for next-gen givers. So clearly, as a sector, we are not asking enough. But when we do ask, are we saying the right things? That's another thing we try to explore. So the study tried to understand how nonprofits segment their individual givers, and sadly, only 37% reported to be doing any kind of segmentation. And it's a known fact that segmentation leads to better and more personalized communication. And the study confirms that organizations who segment based on frequency of contribution in particular raise higher percentage of funds from individuals. So we hear of donor fatigue very, very frequently in the sector worldwide, right? But this finding is really pushing us to question that. Are donors really tired of giving? Or is our messaging to them just too generic, impersonal, and not timed well? So is it really donor fatigue or message fatigue is a question that the report asks us. Now, there were many counterintuitive surprises that came out in the study, but the biggest surprise was this. Organizational characteristics don't predict an organization's experience with everyday giving, meaning age of the organization, size, cause area, location, and budget have virtually no correlation with everyday giving success. So a 2-year-old rural education nonprofit with like a 20 lakh rupee budget can be just as effective as a 30-year-old urban healthcare organization with a 100 crore budget. This completely challenges the myth that only established, well-resourced organizations or organizations working on certain causes can engage everyday givers. This was, definitely the top surprise for us, and good news. So what's really holding nonprofits back? Among those not engaging everyday givers, we saw that the barriers were mostly internal. Limited team capacity, lack of knowledge about donor engagement, and lack of skills were the top 3 barriers. And notably, only 2.7% say everyday giving isn't relevant. They see the value but need support to act on it. And for volunteer engagement as well, we saw similar patterns. About 24% said they don't know volunteer management strategies. Even with those who are engaging everyday givers, capability constraints came out as the main challenge. So the opportunity here is to provide external support, whether it's through funding, training, or ecosystem partnerships. And as organizations mobilizing support towards projects in India, what is the role you can play? Let's see what data says. Data shows that organizations that channel larger portions of their budget to fundraising from everyday giving and those whose team members receive fundraising training see a higher percentage of share from everyday givers in their overall budget. Study data also shows that success comes from building skills and systems and not just hiring more staff. That's not in the slide, but it's there in the report. So we came up with a few things that you can do to help your counterparts in India. One is capacity building, right? You could fundraise to build the capability and capacity of your teams in India in fundraising and volunteer management. Data shows that organizations with trained teams see 19.9 percentage point increases in everyday giving revenue. Second is technology. You could fundraise to support your counterparts in India to adopt CRMs, automated tools, and donor tracking systems. Thirdly, it's strategic support, providing support to your counterparts in India to go from being reactive to having planned year-round giving and retention strategies. And lastly, it's about knowledge sharing, right? Maybe we support with the creation of platforms for peer learning, template sharing, best practice sharing. And really, the opportunity is massive. If we can help more organizations adopt strategic, sustained approaches to everyday giving, we can significantly strengthen India's social sector while also building deeper community connections. So the path forward is pretty clear from the report and the data that it found. We need to invest in capabilities and not just in programs. And we need to help organizations build relationships that can sustain lasting impact, because we saw that most organizations are investing in acquiring new donors and not really engaging them deeply. So thank you so much for listening to me for the last 10 minutes. And my colleagues hopefully have put the link into the chat box. If you want to scan the QR code, you can do that as well. And Alex, I'll hand it back to you now.
Thank you very much. Here we go. I'm going to go to Girish in just a second, but I just say that so much of what you said really is consistent with what I've learned about fundraising in the U.S., which is to say that the challenges are not significantly different. one of the mantras I've come up with about fundraising of all types is you need to spend money to make money. And I think your findings underscore that. The other thing that I learned in terms of retail, what we call, I tend to call retail fundraising. You say everyday giving. Some people say direct response fundraising, is that a donor isn't yours until they've given for the second time. A first-time donor, I used to think early in my career, well, now they're on board, but there's a high, unless you really court a donor, whether they're a $5 donor or a $5 million donor, um, after they've given their first donation, they're likely to just stop donating with that first one. They regard it as just an impulse that they took. But if you want to get into their philanthropic portfolio, your work is just getting started when they've made their first donation, and that structured process of engagement throughout the year that you talked about, absolutely the true. So, well, now I want to turn to Girish before we really open it up to the community. Girish, I've become a good friend. We both live here in the DC area. He's an associate partner at Dalberg Advisors based in DC. He advises government agencies, nonprofits, foundations on the design and launch of initiatives that advance inclusive economic mobility. His recent work includes developing an industry cluster strategy to grow Los Angeles's life sciences sector, launch a $25 million initiative to support BIPOC and women-owned small businesses, and launching a new regional innovation initiative in Greater Phoenix. Girish is a second-generation member of the Indian American diaspora, spent 6 months working as a TechnoServe fellow in Bihar and Mumbai, and is passionate about making it easier for all Indian Americans, and particularly those that are identified as next gen, to learn, engage, and give to social impact causes that they're passionate about. So great to see that you've got your slide deck there, and let me see how I can highlight you. Can I do this? There you are.
Amazing. Thank you, Alex.
Nope, I lost you again, but go right ahead. There we go.
All right.
You're on.
Amazing. Thanks, Alex, for that kind introduction. And it's a real joy to be with you all today. Kavita, I love the presentation, and there are so many parallels between our work. It's really astounding. We should chat more about that. I think the importance of everyday giving and there just not being enough focus there was also loud and clear in our findings, which we'll get into. And also just the need for more segmented giving strategies for different types of donors to build on the progress to date. So very nice to see those parallels. All right, I have 2 slides for you all, which I will walk through in about 10 minutes, and then really eager to get into discussion. So as Alex mentioned, back in 2018, we did a study on Indian American diaspora giving. And what we saw in 2018 is that our community has tremendous giving potential at that time and has continued. Income, wealth was really surging. But the really most striking finding was that our giving was really not living up to our potential in 2018. At every income level, giving was below the US average, and that was resulting in a $2 to $3 billion giving gap back then. And in addition to the quantity of giving, the quality of giving was also a challenge. One of the other most striking findings we found is that we were really interested in a wide array of different passion areas, from climate to gender equality to education to healthcare. But across almost every single one of those, there was a big gap between what we wanted to give to and where donations were actually going. So that was the context for 2018. And Alex, you were correct. I had a hypothesis coming into this work that a lot of those challenges would still be present. I mean, we've seen in the broader US giving market, like there have been a lot of challenges. Giving has been tough. The economy and cost of living has really made it difficult for many people to give, and we thought that would translate into these year's findings. But I'm happy to report that is not the case, and indeed there are a lot of positives to celebrate based on the study we did over the past year on Indian American giving practices in 2024 and 2025. So when we presented this last time, we had a similar conversation to this, and a member of the community stood up and said, whether this data is right or not, we need to triple our giving. We really need to step up and change how we're giving today. And we've more or less done it over the last 7 or 8 years, which is really, really remarkable. So two real things I will highlight here. In the past 6 or 7 years, giving has almost tripled to $4 to $5 billion a year from Indian American donors, which is really remarkable. I think some of this is due to income effects. I mean, the community has continued to grow more wealthy, both on an income and a wealth basis. But the main driver we found was not the income effects, but actually increased commitment to giving. So donations as a percentage of income rose from 1 to 2% to almost 4 to 5%, which is really, really incredible. And most of that was driven by higher income households, which now give more than the national average as a percentage of income. So I think IPA and diaspora, many organizations that have been working on this for the last decade deserve a lot of credit. Things like India Giving Day and also the Philanthropy Summit and other programs have really changed the culture of giving, especially amongst higher income donors. And the last thing I'll say is that the passion donation gap, which was such a striking finding last time, decreased significantly. So organizations like those on the call today are doing a better job of making it easier for folks to give where their hearts are. Although there is still a gap that remains in a few issue areas, which I'll talk about more, but we're clearly doing better and making it easier, which is tremendous progress. And then the last thing I'll say, which Alex touched on in his intro, volunteering continues to be a real strength and superpower. I mean, Kavita, you mentioned this in the India context as well. I think you said 70% of organizations are engaging volunteers. And I think similar story in the US context. Um, Volunteering at almost 3 times the rates of the US average. And Americans actually already volunteer a lot. So that's actually quite remarkable. And we found particular strengths in kind of skills-based volunteering, a lot of board membership, a lot of donating kind of professional skills to causes, which we know is really valuable. So this is a very positive story. There's been a lot of progress, and we've really stepped up, seen the challenge, and met it. But I think the last thing we want to leave you with is we're not done. There are still some challenges that persist, and some have actually grown. So a few things to highlight here. I mentioned that there are some passion donation gaps, which is the difference between causes that we care about and where money actually goes once we donate. And there are a few that remain and have actually grown over the last decade. And specifically, the biggest gaps we saw were in gender equality and climate change. And actually, given the salience of these issues today and how much they're growing globally, we were quite surprised by that. And I think this is something that really merits additional attention for groups that do focus on these areas, and also is a great opportunity area that this is something that people want to give to, and we just need to find ways to make that easier for them. The second is that despite this overall increase in giving, because income and wealth has increased as well over the past decade, there is still a $1 billion giving gap between our potential for giving as a community and how much we actually gave in the past year. And as I mentioned earlier, in previous iterations of the study, the gap was really concentrated amongst the higher income cohorts. Similar to the Giving Tuesday report, actually, like a lot of the gap now is actually among middle income and lower income, more everyday giving cohorts, which probably have not been as much of a focus, rightly so, for the community over the last decade, but really should be going forward, especially because many of these next gen donors, newer donors, they stand to earn and inherit a tremendous amount of wealth over the coming decades. They're going to be the big donors of tomorrow. And I think there's a short-term play to close the gap for sure. That's very important. But we view this as really about long-term sustainability and making sure we're cultivating the next generation of donors today. And we have some specific strategies we'll talk about in a moment about how we can do that. And the last thing I'll highlight is there were significant gender differences in giving across a range of our findings. And I'll also drop a link to the report, and you can read more there. But in general, women respondents gave almost 40% less than men as a percentage of income, and really faced unique barriers to giving that some we might expect, including resource constraints, competing life priorities, but also really strong passion giving gaps as well, especially in issues related to gender equality. So I think more research is needed to really understand what is driving that. Our study didn't get too deep into that, but a clear opportunity to engage women more in causes that they care about, especially gender equality, where there's a huge amount of interest, but also a very big gap between the number of folks that are actually donating to those causes. And I think some of our broader recommendations are particularly important in better supporting and engaging women in giving. So I'll get to these tactical things in a moment. Maybe the last thing I'll say is stepping back a bit, we're really excited about the opportunity ahead of the Indian American diaspora when it comes to giving. The community has built really extraordinary wealth over the last several decades. There's one Bridgespan estimate that says ultra high net worth individuals in the US are going to have almost $1 trillion in wealth by 2030. There are other estimates that say the Indian American diaspora is poised to transfer $2 trillion in wealth to the next generation over the next 2 decades. I mean, just let those numbers sink in. 1 trillion, 2 trillion. If we can increase giving by just 1% of wealth, which is not a lot, that could unlock 10 to 20 billion in giving annually, right? I mean, the Gates Foundation gave out about 8 billion last year. So the type of impact we're talking about is not a small increase. We're talking about really transformative impact that this community is capable of over the next couple of decades. And yes, we should be aiming at closing the giving gap of 1 billion, but there's a real bigger opportunity to set a new standard for giving going forward. And that's maybe the call to action we'll leave you with this time, for what's possible for our community. But I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, okay, that's a nice call to action and aspirational, but what can we actually do to make some of this happen in the short term? And our report did include several tactical recommendations that organizations can undertake to engage some of these donors that are not giving up to their potential today, close that giving gap, and raise revenue for the important organizations that are on this call. I won't get into all of these because I think I'm getting close to time now, but maybe I will just touch on 3 that we thought were particularly important and also have some resonance with the Giving Tuesday findings as well. The first one is just like outreach and engagement. One of the most striking things I found as a next-gen member of the community myself is 25% of next-gen respondents in our survey have never been asked to donate to causes that they care about. So we're not even reaching them today. And I'll just say, like, again, I lived and worked in India. I am in the community. I work in social impact. I have never actually been asked to donate to an Indian American organization until now, until engaging in this work. But I think there's a real opportunity just to do the segmentation the Giving Tuesday team talked about and make sure we are really creating tailored outreach and engagement strategies that meet next gen donors where they are. And I know some folks on this call, I know the IPA team have been doing some of that already to engage next gen members as leaders. But I think from a donor engagement standpoint, there's clearly still more to be done to make sure every organization is prioritizing next gen as part of their fundraising strategy. The second is, we call it peer learning platforms, but I call it community. I think there's a real hunger for braiding community learning and giving together, especially amongst next gen, and actually especially amongst next gen women. So creating safe spaces where you can gather with peers, learn about issues, give together to create impact at scale was the most requested thing amongst next gen women and one of the most requested strategies for next gen. So these often look like giving circles or donor networks where you get together, kick in, $100 or some amount each month, and then pool your knowledge and resources to pick a cause that goes to. To our knowledge, there's about 4,000 giving circles in the US and just one focused on the Indian American diaspora. So this seems like a real opportunity in the short term to better engage folks through community in giving. And the last one is called, all the way at the bottom here, information infrastructure. We use very fancy words on this slide, but making it easier to give is what I would call it. And I think that the most asked for resource across nearly every segment was verified lists of high quality nonprofits in key issue areas in the US and India. And through just like my own one-on-one conversations with members of the community, that's what folks are asking for, right? People are busy, especially next gen. They're starting families, they're busy with work. They don't have time to make this the number one focus of their lives. They want to say, I mean, they're asking for, if I really care about climate, what is the trusted organization I can go to that will tell me here's 5 really high quality organizations working on climate in India to make it easy for me. So we need to build that, and we need to make it easier to do that. And I think organizations on this call, IPA, have a great opportunity to help make that happen, given the trust we have built over the last decade of work. So I'll pause there because I really want to open it up to questions and conversations. But our hope is that by launching some of these initiatives and others, we can take that next step and move from thinking about this closing the gap or getting to average mentality to really moving beyond that and setting a new standard together for philanthropic giving. So thank you. Excited for the conversation.
Fantastic. And let me get, here we go. Girish, just you highlighted a couple of things I just want to let the community know about, and then I'm going to open it up to everyone to engage in the conversation. One is that I think it was about 5 years ago, IPA spent an entire year kind of researching how we could be better at reaching out to the next gen donors. And it led to, and we interviewed a lot of next gen donors or potential donors in the process. One of the things that came out of that was a kind of a 15-page guidelines, which we're happy to share with any group that that doesn't have access to it. Maybe they weren't involved with IPA at the time. We boiled down the essence of those into a 2-part series that was published by the Chronicle of Philanthropy. We can also share those more shortened versions. And we, at the same time, we developed a guideline that more and more of our organizations on our board are meeting, which is to have on the governing bodies of organizations represented on the IPA board, that they would have at least one board member under 35 years old, symbolically. And so the other thing that I would, anyway, there was something else, but I forget about it. But let's go. We have a question from. I can answer one in the chat, but I'm going to open it up to people, verbally to state their own question. Sarita Gupta, our friend, asked whether the data from the Dalberg report was influenced by giving around COVID second wave. And I think the answer is pretty clearly no, because the data that we were asking for was about giving in the calendar year 2024. And so we did ask a question about giving during COVID, but we didn't really include that in the report because the recall of donations that long ago are not really that reliable. The question that I will put to you, Girish, is Sejal asked about the growth. The growth of giving, was it mostly giving to India, giving to U.S. causes? Do we know of this growth, how it was how it related to giving in different country contexts?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers offhand, although maybe Alex, we can follow up with this group because I think we do have that data available. What I will say is that in this most recent survey, there was significant amount of giving to U.S. entities. I don't know the exact split, but I think it was pretty close. Nearly half was giving to kind of give where you live and causes in the US. So I think there is so much interest, especially amongst the next gen, in not just giving to causes in India, but giving to Indian related causes in the US, but also non-Indian related causes in the US. And I think it's important to be able to that the community is engaging in that full breadth of ranges. I think ultimately what we want to be doing is connecting folks to things they're passionate about, right? So a long-winded way of saying, I suspect a lot of the growth was due to giving in the US, but given the magnitude of the growth, giving to India also increased significantly, and we know that.
Okay, thank you. Let me open up the floor to anyone who's here. I think this may be our best attended town hall, not by a lot, but by a little that we've ever had, which wasn't a big surprise given the importance of these reports. Who'd like to ask a question, make a comment, make a suggestion about all these issues?
Alex, may I ask a question?
Sure. Go right ahead.
How much there have been some very large donations to universities in the US and by Indian donors, and how much of that would skew that Indian giving has increased significantly over the last 7 years, what you have studied. And was it widespread amongst the Indian diaspora, or like a few major gifts versus a.
Yeah, I'll pass that to Girish first, but I'll say that in diaspora has been studying Indian American giving to higher ed for some years, and they have their own reports about that are that we haven't totally cross-referenced all those, but the giving is to higher ed in the U.S. is significant from the diaspora, I don't think it is the major piece of this though. But I don't know, Girish, what would you say?
Yeah, I think maybe just one response is I pasted something in the chat just now, which is kind of passion areas that respondents to the survey listed. And you will say like education is right at the top of the list. So I think it's like a very good hypothesis, both in India and to universities in the US. That is the top area that people are passionate about and indeed where they donate. But you can also look at all the other causes on this list. Like there is a real diversity of issues, both where people have passions and where they're donating. And you see that in the data as well. So it's not all going to education or even a majority. So I think that's on the causes part. On kind of the breadth of the community versus few small donors. If you open the report, one of the graphics is giving by income level. And what you see is that amongst higher income donors, indeed to your point, they are giving above the US average, but across the income spectrum, we're giving, right? And I think we're giving a lot. I would say I think to kind of align with the GivingTuesday team's findings, like there is a real need to better engage folks at lower income levels. And lower income, by the way, includes people making like 100, 200, even $300,000 a year, to engage them more, because that's where we see a bit of lagging against the overall US average. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
And my congratulations on your recent gala, which I heard was extremely successful, and as usual, and continuing this momentum in the way that only you and your team at Children's Hope International can. Kavita, do you want to comment on kind of any of these topics and how they might play out in India or related to your report before we take another question?
I actually wanted to highlight something interesting that I found while reviewing the report again today, is that foreign colleges, universities, and schools were rated as the least effective channel to get volunteers by Indian nonprofits, which I found very interesting. It's also the channel that's least used by Indian nonprofits. And I feel like this community can play a role in changing that around. And I just wanted to open up a question of why do you think that is the case? What is the gap there? Why do you think Indian nonprofits are not finding this an effective channel? If anybody has thoughts on that, would be really interesting.
All right, turning it around, the panel asking the audience questions. I love it. This is really meant to be a community conversation. Who else? Thank you, Kavita, for that. Who answering her question or asking one of your own or raising something new? Sejal?
Yeah, just a comment, and I'm sure other colleagues, from IPA might also have insights into this. But I think there are some Indian nonprofits that have penetrated the college, share quite well, right? So whether it's Asha for Education or AID, Association for India's Development, to some extent Vibha. And we actually saw on India Giving Day as well. There are a few of the participants, who were very good at mobilizing college students, right? And I think it's a whole, you build chapters. There's a whole different connect that happens. I don't know if some of the other organizations, Akanksha included, Pratham, AIF, right, Akshay Patra, while many of them might have gone for a chapter-based model, right, engaging other volunteers. Part of it could be attention, but also it's just strategy of fundraising and strategy of engagement, right? And so I think that's just my observation. Kavita, I don't know if you have anything more.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sejal. And just not knowing how to engage students in another part of the world. I just felt like there's a role that people in the room can play to change that around. So just wanted to highlight that. Yeah.
So this is Preeti from Aarti for Girls. Sorry, I'm on, my video sort of off, but I can speak a little bit about engagement of overseas volunteers. So we've had a bit of a steady stream, maybe I want to say 10 to 12 years ago, where we had constant flow of volunteers, specifically from the US, but also from Germany. And it would almost be like the current set of volunteers would sort of inform the next set of volunteers and were very active voices in sort of recruiting those people. What has happened is like it's not necessarily one thing that caused that program to sort of die down. One is there were very dedicated people here on the ground who were sort of ensuring that that program continued in terms of the recruiting, volunteering, and that's not an insignificant effort. Either the person who was here dedicated to sort of doing that sort of couldn't sort of sustain that, or the program within the universities itself sort of died down for various reasons, right? And the second aspect of it was there was quite a bit of scrutiny by the Indian government in terms of volunteers coming in from overseas and the agenda sort of associated with what are these people doing here, what are they doing within our nonprofit organizations, and that became a tad too much, right? So that both from the NGO itself, but also the people sort of visiting. And the third thing was just in terms of the visas, right? That's become a huge challenge in and of itself. I mean, I attempted to sort of revive a pretty sort of successful program that we ran from Santa Clara University. And I met with the volunteer who was very sort of engaged in ensuring that we had a steady stream of volunteers. And she was like, that program just died down. There's no funding. It is impossible to revive that. So that sort of went and hit a dead end. So it's taken a bit of a backseat, and I have to agree with you that they have been some of our fiercest voices here, right? Once they've sort of volunteered at Aarti for Girls and they've sort of come here, and they till this day, we engage with them on a donor to donor basis, but they're not as optimistic about reviving similar programs across universities, and even more so given the scrutiny around diversity and anything sort of that sits outside of the US. It's much harder to revive those programs now. I mean, at least that's sort of the general sense that I've gotten, having spoken to them and having attempted to revive it in some form of fashion. Sorry, so that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Preeti. That was really insightful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Kavita, Girish, any comment on that before we go? I think Deepak wanted to get in, but anything about what she just said?
Maybe just one reaction, having been in grad school not so long ago myself here in the US. There are so many American students that actually go to India every year on school-sponsored trips, like thousands, maybe tens of thousands, right? The trip, my recollection, like 100 students from Harvard went to India, and they had a great time meeting with, government officials and corporate leaders. I don't know if they met any nonprofit leaders on that trip. I don't think so. And they certainly did not engage critically in thinking about how they could support those organizations and important work going on in that country afterwards. That seems very doable, right? These people are already interested. They chose to spend money to go to India to learn about the culture. I think that's kind of low-hanging fruit across a bunch of universities. I'd be really interested to see like what could a giving circle or something when paired with those trips do to engage even 5-10% of those folks. That's real impact.
Fascinating, Gary. There's some joke here about 100 Harvard grad students going to a bar, but I can't quite finish it. But maybe someone can help me. So Deepak, were you wanting to get in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a little bit, probe a little bit. How do we do this? I mean, I think Girish mentioned legacy giving, and I love trillions of dollars. I mean, that has a really nice sound to it, right? It's and in this, were you able to analyze these numbers a little bit, Girish? This $4 or $5 billion of giving. Are we beginning to see legacy giving coming in? Are people putting organizations in their wills and so on and so forth? Is there some evidence building on that?
Yeah, I don't think, I think the answer is no, to be honest. Like we did not get deep enough to be able to say, how much are very wealthy, in particular, first-gen donors actually starting to do some of these trusts and other things to engage in that transition. What I will say is, and this surprised me actually, both first-gen and next-gen donors who were on the more wealthy side really, really, really were asking for support in engaging family in giving decisions. It was one of the most asked for things, which
Interesting.
I expected first gen. I did not expect next gen to also be hungry for that engagement. Again, my own bias is coming into play a bit here, but that seems like a real opportunity. Whether and you look at what other diaspora communities have done. If you look at like Jewish Funders Network, for example, like you can get a free consultation with an expert to walk you through kind of the basics of how do you kind of create a family giving plan, create a trust, engage the next generation in giving. So I think there's a lot of, and they have dedicated giving circles actually, where they bring family members together, spanning generation, to kind of learn about giving and do that together. So there's a real need for it. I know personally that it's happening in some of the families that I know, but I don't think it's widespread, and I think there's a real need for more of that.
Yeah. I'll just, for those of you that missed it, we actually had our town hall in September was about legacy giving, or what some people call plan giving. And there are a lot of good tips and techniques that came through with that. Our guest last month. And we've actually put that on our YouTube channel. You can watch that. The other thing is, and I think this goes back to some things that Kavita said, legacy giving, plan giving in particular, is something where you really need to be willing to play the long game. You need to be willing to make investments now that are going to start to pay off in 5, 10, 15 years. And a lot of small nonprofits with that kind of hand to mouth instant gratification, you feel so urgent about what you getting your funding for this year. And I've run organizations and I've operated that way, but putting aside some of those things that are going to pay off, some of the investments in everyday giving capabilities that Kavita was talking about, they're not going to pay off in 6 months. It's iterative. You learn, you do more, and so donors like you, Deepak, who in your support of the many groups you're involved in, that really have helped organizations make those long-term investments in fundraising capability is absolutely essential, and what I kind of call that philanthropy 3.0, that most sophisticated level of giving, and hopefully we'll have more people giving in kind of the spirit and the manner that you do, as the qualitatively growth follows the quantitative growth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I just like the idea that how big that pot is, right? I mean, I think it is that the TAM is huge, the way it was explained, and I appreciate that. So I think that could be the North Star for some of the organizations, who have the capability to think longer term. That's a valid point, Alex. Thank you, guys.
Very good. I think we have time for one more question or comment. I will say, though, that Girish made the point that the importance of people are looking for vetted lists of nonprofits in different sectors, and that's really what India Giving Day is aspiring to be. And these past 3 years, I think we've done a lot towards that. There are other groups that are working on this from other perspectives. Giving Pie, for example, more at the high end of it, but this is and hopefully there'll be others, but that's the 36 organizations that were part of India Giving Day campaign last year, and I think we'll probably have 40 to 50 groups this year. And not every group that applies is accepted. We do take our role as a quality control seriously. But let's hear from at least one more person before we wrap. Oh, this community at a loss for words. I'm shocked.
I know.
Maya, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a question for Kavita. She mentioned that, building capability and not just hiring more staff, it's not necessarily the solution. So in that building that capability, does that mean training the board and other elements, and your volunteers? And how would you suggest doing that?
That's a great question. Thanks, Maya. I mean, what Udarta data shows is, I mean, one of the key elements that I highlighted today was that organizations that send their team members for fundraising trainings see a higher percentage of share of giving from everyday givers. And another data point, which I did not share today, was around the fact that organizations that send their team members for trainings tend to have a lower share of recurring givers, which was another shocker for us. And we were trying to figure out why that is the case. And it could be that the training programs that we have in India today are focused on acquisition and not on building relationships or even thinking about retention of everyday givers. So one of the pieces for me is that how can we build the capability of team members in India who are focused on engaging everyday givers to think about this as a long run game, as Alex pointed out, and not as a one-off campaign, let's make it a hit and then we forget about it. How can we help them track what they've done, learn from it, analyze it, and then do it better the next year and keep building those relationships? A lot of nonprofits, even anecdotally, we know, are just running campaigns with focusing on new donor acquisition year on year and really forgetting about the ones that actually contributed the first time around or the second time around. So for me, the top one is that how do we get the mindset shift from one-time donations to engaging them for the long term? Priyanka, Ragini, if you want to add anything, please do share as well. And that's what the Udarta data is saying, Maya. I mean, lots of other things I can share as a fundraiser, but this is what data is saying.
How many campaigns a year do you think would be so that you don't end up with donor fatigue or constantly being asked as opposed to?
This is not something we asked in the study, but at Giving Tuesday, we do run trainings on this topic, and we ask the nonprofits to analyze that for themselves because it really depends on the goals that they have as an organization, the segmentation they want to do with each type of campaign that they run, and really the bandwidth that they have as an organization to be able to run campaigns, because campaigns are, it's exhausting and it consumes a lot of time. So it really depends on each organization's capability to handle campaigns and the goals that they have. But again, once you run campaigns, how can you really build those relationships for the long run is key, and that's not being thought about by Indian organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Girish, any final comment as we wrap up here?
No, I think the main thing that we're excited about is there are like real opportunities. And again, the linkages between these two bodies of research, I think, points to like this is not just an artifact of data. Like there are real needs and real opportunities to bring other people into the community. It's going to pay tremendous dividends in the short term. But for us, again, the long-term TAM, as was put, and opportunity and need for sustainability is so increasingly obvious that would love to continue having these type of conversations and making sure there's attention, effort, investment in building this infrastructure for giving going forward that's going to help take us to the next level. So thanks for the time.
Great. Thanks to both of you. And I just simply say, there have been studies about diaspora philanthropy in India over the last about 10 to 12 years. Bridgespan, Gates, and other ones from Dalberg, MacArthur Foundation, and they're all fairly consistent. They all have different unique insights, but they're fairly consistent. And what is left is for those of us to really take these findings on board, and then do something about them. And I'm very pleased that when Sunil Wadhwani stood up when the 2018 Dalberg report came out and he said we should triple giving, and that was really one of the things that set us on the pathway to creating India Giving Day. And so which is an imperfect campaign, just like all of them are, but we've really been tried to take these findings on board and get into action. And I think all three of our organizations and others besides Dalberg and Giving Tuesday and IPA really stand ready to be your partners in implementing these. And don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. if you see 12 things you could do from today, try 2, and if you get those, try another 2, and do the best you can. We're here to help, and thanks to all of you for coming. Thank you to our speakers for generating these reports and then sharing them with us today, and they remain resources for all of us as we go forward. So thanks very much. I hope to see you at our next town hall on November 19th, and welcome ideas from the community about topics to cover in the future. Best to all of you.
Thank you very much. It was a great.
Thank you so much.
Take care.